the AI first, you must put data first, right? Which is a focus on data quality. But again, even downstream, what does that mean to these executives that are coming to talk? I kind of think we've got this toddler that we're still like walking around, kind of holding its hand, making sure, the baby can walk, right? I mean, kind of, that's kind of the analogy that I think about artificial intelligence, to feeding it everything we could feed it. And now we're kind of dealing with those repercussions of like, okay, it's doing this, it's doing that, right? Take those baby steps to get us closer to quote unquote what we want to achieve, which is artificial general intelligence. And I think, it's just going back to taking a step back and maybe reflecting a little bit on what we've got. We've made a tremendous amount of progress as a whole.
I'd like to welcome everybody to today's episode of Facing Disruption. We have Chris LaCour on, the organizer of the upcoming Put Data First event. And you'll see I'm in my Hack the Planet t-shirt because 30 years ago this month, Hackers was released on the world. And as a young kid, that kind of inspired me to think programming was way cooler. And, here we are now with the cool webcast. But Chris, really excited for you to be joining today. I have spent so much of my career talking about the importance of data, where it plays, organizations struggle with it. Why don't we just start? Tell us a little bit about yourself in the Put Data First conference.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. So I have been I've been thinking about, AI and its importance and the overall impact it's had on businesses and our society. And this has all come really fast. And given my background, so just for some context, some clarification, I'm an unstructured data guy. I come from electronic discovery and information governance. I worked for a few vendors in my past life. And so, we were working with corporate legal departments and law firms in a discovery context, working with unstructured data. So emails, business documents, text messages, right? The list goes on and on and on. And what I started to do I'd say about a year ago, is I started reaching out to chief data officers, chief digital transformation officers, chief AI officers. And I was asking them, what's keeping you up at night? Right. And it was a lot of what I heard from these individuals was the same thing that I heard years ago, which was, I don't know where my data is. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it is, right? A plethora of data governance issues, data classification issues, and now that we have, artificial intelligence, AI as the coin term, right? It just seems like a lot of these problems are, really hindering the successes, right, that are having with artificial intelligence. There was an interesting MIT put out a really interesting I don't know if it was some sort of report or if it was a post or what have you. I don't know what the right terminology is, but in short, it was talking about 95% of companies in are having, are struggling, right, with the challenges, right, identifying use cases. There's plenty of that, but essentially the challenge was implementing artificial intelligence and where are the ROIs, right? And so it was really interesting because as I was starting to talk with folks within my inner network, and with the conversation that I had with people that were, that I was recruiting to come and speak at the conference, a lot of the same points are being told to me and shared with me every day. And were told to me a year ago when I was starting to recruit speakers for the upcoming conference that we're having this October in Las Vegas. And so, again, a lot of these issues has to deal with structured data, unstructured data. I've been hearing a lot of, data living inside of Snowflake, Databricks, right? But some people are using this terminology, data sewage. I know, again, that was what was shared to me. And so, it's just interesting. I think, and then just the time for prepping data, right? It takes a considerable amount of time. There's internal tools. There's other technologies that companies are licensing to these enterprises, these mid-market organizations. And I just think from what when I'm talking to these decision makers, these business executives, these stakeholders, it just seems like they're overwhelmed. I
Mhm.
I get this sense that they're overwhelmed and there's a lot on their plate and they're very, very busy. And, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this event, because AI means different things to different people in different roles,
Mhm.
right? And so the chief information security officer may be concerned about AI security, right? The head of risk or compliance is concerned about, AI governance, right? And you have chief legal officers or general counsel, right? So you have a number of stakeholders now that are embracing artificial intelligence, and they want to leverage it, right, for their business, because
Mhm.
of that saying, well, if you don't leverage AI, right, you'll be a thing of the past.
Mhm.
Okay, fine. So what I'm finding though is that companies are still struggling with, you know, how are we going to implement AI within our business? And I think the first thing that companies should start to look at is ultimately, you know, data quality. But as I talk to companies, even on the unstructured data side, a lot of them were telling me, you know what, we're just wrapping our head around what we have structured data wise, Chris. Unstructured
Mhm.
data, which makes up a good majority of the enterprise, which, they coined the percentage 80%. A lot of the companies that I've been talking to, they said, we're not even there yet.
Mhm.
And so when we start talking about business documents, PDFs, audio, video, right, images, right, they're still, I think it's in some regard, some are again ahead of others, but I think overall the theme that I'm hearing is we're still wrapping our head around the strategy and what that's going to look like and what we're going to be doing. I know a lot of the companies that I was talking to were also seeking to implement, go go the agent route, right? And so, again, it just seems like the way that I think about artificial intelligence in the industry today, this is just my own personal opinion, is I think we've gotten this off the ground, and, we're having some successes, and certainly with the likes of what OpenAI, ChatGPT, right, Anthropic, all of these other, very
Mhm.
long, what they've done, and with the advent of large language models, certainly has changed the way that we are engaging with one another, working, right? And so it's made a major impact in our day-to-day lives. But I still consider it to be in the toddler stages. I have young
Mhm. Mhm.
myself, and so I kind of think we've got this toddler that we're still like walking around, kind of holding its hand, making sure the baby can walk, right? I mean, kind of, that's kind of the analogy that I think about artificial intelligence. And I know that some would maybe argue that we're a little bit more farther along down the road, and that's fine. But a lot of what I'm hearing though these days has me a little bit concerned, in the sense that a lot of what I would call executives in artificial intelligence, some of the who we think the leaders in the space are, they're touting the use of synthetic data, right?
Mhm.
You have that angle. You have there was a really interesting article that was out. I don't know who put out the article, but it's online. You can go and look at it, about Elon Musk talking about we've tapped into all of the world's data resources, or and something along those lines. I mean, don't quote me, but essentially it was really interesting reading that, and I think that's part of the issue that I think we're coming across, as we're starting to see now these outcomes with how these models are, quote unquote, behaving, right? Like all of the stories that we're hearing now. I think we've kind of maybe have rushed to feeding it everything we could feed it. And now we're kind of dealing with those repercussions of like, okay, it's doing this, it's doing that, right? And so anyways, there was
And
a
now some predictable. Right?
it's like, well, right?
I like what you said, data sewage. So
Yeah.
we had called it data swamp. So sewage comes out of the swamp, right? And just reflecting back, because there's so much to unpack with what you had just said. First, I will link to the MIT report in the comments. I also am not sure what to call it, because like I get the reports from MIT Technology Review and like all of their white papers, and then this thing just came out to almost as like an aside to all of it, to say 95% of AI initiatives are seemingly failing, right? which honestly, that number shouldn't surprise any of us because for the past year and a half, we've had IBM and Dell and even some of the big integrators talking about how they're seeing 70% up of AI initiatives not achieve business return. So to say 95% is, yeah, this is what we've been saying for a year and a half. So I'll link to that in the bottom, but let's take a step and talk about the data sewage, right? And now we're getting into it with the LLMs. So, we've gone through these discrete kind of data eras or epochs over the past several years, decades. And big data was all the rave, 15 years ago. Everything had to move to big data, your data lakes, then your data oceans. Today, 2025, to hear that we're still seeing leaders struggle with just fundamental data structures and classification and just an overwhelming amount of data is a little bit surprising. Why do you think that is?
From the conversations I had with these stakeholders, a lot of it was due to, well, for example, data quality, duplicates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other issues were around data governance issues, right? Who has to what, which goes back to data classification. But I think part of the problem is, in my mind, if I could answer that somewhat on the spot, I think a lot of it has to do with data classification.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the technology tools that exist today that these enterprises are licensing and using use some sort of machine learning or natural language processing. You have Microsoft Purview, for example, that uses reinforcement learning. I just feel like I think companies are struggling with it from a classification perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it is still riddled with human in the loop. There's a number of technology tools, and I think a lot of this is causing more harm than good. I think there's also, it's actually quite interesting. A lot of the people that I run with and that are in my inner network are chief data officers. And I heard a lot of them share this with me, which didn't make sense, but apparently this is the norm, that a lot of them get into a new role. They have like a couple of years to get the company's, data together, quote unquote. And if they don't have a job there no more.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? What that means is that these data officer roles, they're short-lived. It's not a long time span. And from what I'm hearing from them in private, a lot of them are telling me that, the companies are saying, hey, we have good data quality. The data here is great. But when they really get into it all, that's not the case.
I echo what you said. I've heard that in a lot of conversations. Everybody's ready to talk about how good their data is.
Sure.
And then the second you begin to peel back the cover, there's no good data.
Yeah.
Good data. It's not what they thought it was.
Correct. Yeah. And you have there's a lot of, and that's one of the reasons why, just to kind of bring this to like, why the event's happening. I think a lot of what I'm hearing as well is the departments and the job roles, and specifically the job titles, the chief information security officer, the chief privacy officer, the chief risk officer, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, who's paying for all this.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them, there's still an education gap. I think there's a knowledge gap as well. And, I think from what I'm hearing within companies that are heavily regulated, like, for example, LLMs are token guessers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no representation of truth, none whatsoever. And that's part of the problem that we have in artificial intelligence today. But yet, a lot of what you're hearing and seeing from these interviews from YouTube, from online interviews or wherever you're sourcing your news, the overall, I guess from an industry perspective, what I'm seeking to say is, let's build more data centers. Let's spend billions of dollars building these data centers, right, and putting all of this money towards, compute, and we're gonna, I guess magic will appear, and we're gonna have artificial general intelligence, and I think the industry is wrong. There's also obviously, we should probably get into a little bit of this. I should say obviously, but there's conversation, there's talk about whether or not we're in an AI bubble. Have investors bid off too much and invest money into these companies with the hopes and dreams that we were going to see something that is not panning out the way that we thought we were going to see that those investments pan out. It's very clear to me as I talk with software companies that are also sponsoring the event that everyone has some sort of flavor of artificial intelligence, right, it packed into their overall software product. But what are we doing fundamentally to solve the issue of artificial intelligence? And I think, we need to start looking at what we have and how do we, resolve what we're seeking to resolve. And I think that's going to take what I would say a wider group of some really bright, intelligent people to do that. We're certainly working on some things. I'm a serial entrepreneur at heart, and we've got some great things that are under development. But but getting back to the conversation at hand, just as you had said, why do I think this is? I think it's a number of those issues that are just, compounding. And, right now, that's just where we're at. And until we, put our heads around what it is we have and how we can work together to get AI further along the way, then, we'll get there. But and there's even talk, I hear people saying that we're going to have artificial general intelligence in, the next 5 to 10 years. What makes us unique as human beings is we have the ability to reason, we have logic, right? And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're there. I don't think we're there. I think, again, it's going to take some time, but, again, more my opinions.
Yeah, I agree. So kind of working backwards to some of the topics, I agree on the, AGI and humans' ability to invent, right? I listened to somebody talk last year and I really liked the way that he put it. He said, innovation is the mashing together of different ideas to solve a problem.
Sure.
Invention is the creation of something completely new, right? So if we think about AI as an innovation engine, it's just it's essentially a model that's going to jam different things together to say, oh, this piece fits what you're looking for, and it's going to do that over and over and over again, which is, I think really valuable on its own, but it's not invention, right? And the conversation a couple weeks ago with Sam Altman, he was talking about, you had mentioned consuming all this data and now synthetic data, which we have a talk about synthetic data that is also on the channel, but, eventually we're going to consume the data. Somebody still has to create new data, right? Is AI going to help us invent new things? I don't have an answer for that. If it's sitting in front of a computer or sitting in a computer on a data center, probably not as likely until it starts doing its own research in the physical space.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, people have really, really high hopes. Do you think we're in a bubble? Maybe we should define what the bubble is.
I think we are. I do. I'll come out and say it. I do. I think we, look, certainly this technology is very important for mankind. And I think for generations to come and what it's going to be bringing to our society and the endless possibilities of artificial intelligence, it's quite fascinating. But I think I do personally believe that if we are going to continue to invest in these data centers and spend billions of dollars, and if we don't start to look at another alternative to the large language model, I do feel like we are coming across, I think I don't know what the right terminology is, but I do think we're at a crossroads where, I think the ROI, well, I mean, look at the news and what we're hearing about, you know, these companies like OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's not profitable yet,
Mhm.
right? And so, you can't, I guess, going back to basic finance, you cannot continue to spend more money than what you're bringing in.
Mhm.
If you don't have a viable business, um, how long are you going to continue to go ask investors to put money into this? I think we are going to see some shakeup in the not so distant future. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is it's just not sustainable,
Yeah.
and the pace to which we are spending money. And if you look at compute and what's been projected in terms of what we need to quote unquote see artificial general intelligence, there's not enough money. It's trillions of dollars.
Mhm.
And the overall impact it's having on energy and just our planet as well, which, some people are talking about, others not so much. I mean, you just got to think about this. I mean, really, they're talking about nuclear reactors. It's just, again, going back to, the overall, what we're hearing and seeing. I just think it's not sustainable for the long term. And I think the companies, the technology companies specifically, that can drive technologies that are fundamentally going to change the overall trajectory of artificial intelligence and how it's created. I think those are the companies that are going to win.
Okay.
And so, I even talk to a lot of machine learning folks and data scientists there. There's like, we have some odd, like 20 some odd flavors of RAG today, for example.
Mhm.
Right. And a lot of the even people that I work with are even arguing about some of the challenges with RAG. So I mean, again, it goes back to, looking at addressing the landscape of what we have and how do we improve on what we have today and take those baby steps to get us closer to quote unquote what we want to achieve, which is artificial general intelligence. And I think, it's just going back to taking a step back and maybe reflecting a little bit on what we've got. We've made a tremendous amount of progress as a whole. There's been some great technology inventions. I'm just saying, I don't think that these are, I think technology will continue to evolve, obviously, as it does. And, we'll just have to look at some other ways to get to where we want to get to. That's my personal.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it becomes even more applicable as you scale down the vision. So, what you said, getting to where we wanted to get to with AGI, you
Yeah.
could even say with an individual organization to get where they want to get to with just AI in general, right? They need to take those baby steps to getting their data foundations correct. And this is, if you think about the Gartner technology hype cycle and, everything is in a bubble and then you go into the trough of disillusionment and, you ask yourself, why is that? And I could see, there's a lot of different reasons that it could be the investors spending a lot of money, the technology not meeting expectations. I would even say sometimes the mismatch of expectations, like we're seeing AI is a lot of technology led initiatives. And what I'm hearing from you is you're hearing that, the data foundations still aren't what they thought it would be, right?
Yeah.
And you have technologists who are saying this technology is going to solve everything. So does that bubble, whatever constitutes the bubble, how much of that is just the reality of, in order to do AI, you need to have a foundation built and you have to be focused on revenue impacting initiatives, right? You can't just say, here's the technology. So that's what I think the bubble is going to be, is just the trough of disillusionment. AI didn't come in to solve all of our problems without us doing any work. We still have to do the fundamental work.
No, I'm in agreement with you. You brought up some very valid points. I think more recently, what we're hearing and seeing on the LLM output side is just, the LLMs are hallucinations, right? And
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic forgetfulness, and So again, and that goes back to the core, which is, it's a large language model, right? And so that's it. Just when I think about this, I get really excited about it. But from when I'm talking with companies and recruiting speakers and sponsors to the upcoming event, it seems to me that there's so many. I guess what I'm trying to say is they're overwhelmed with so many technologies. They're having different conversations internally about, what directions we need to go. It was actually interesting, if I could bring this up, I almost forgot. And this was brought up as a potential topic for the upcoming conference. How do we get our board on board? And, yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting, right? And so we're going to be talking about some of that at the upcoming conference, all right? And in addition to obviously data quality, because on the website, if you go there, you'll see that there's a slogan, to be AI first, you must put data first, right? Which is a focus on data quality. But again, even downstream, what does that mean to these executives that are coming to talk at the conference? And speaking of the conference, before I forget, I'll kind of talk about the conference format, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The format is nothing new per se. I didn't create roundtable discussions, but what I have done for this particular event and for future events, what we're focusing on is we're going to be doing away with panel discussions. So usually when you go to a conference and you're on a panel, you could be speaking. They're typically sponsored by vendors, and the vendors have their clients on the panel, and they'll have their, chief evangelist or their CEO or their chief revenue officer, whoever's moderating the panel. It's about an hour in length, and then you'll have two or three, their clients sitting on the panel, and they'll be talking about a particular subject matter. And you as a participant, you're there. You're usually in a meeting room listening, right? But what do you find yourself doing? You're typically on your cell phone, and you could be texting your colleague, or what have you. And so you're not really engaged in that sense. Or the other option is to go to the exhibit floor and then just go and roam and see what vendors, if you're, working with them, what's the latest and greatest, what version they have of their technology, what maybe use cases they could solve for what you have, right, et cetera, et cetera. And whereas what I wanted to focus on in the community that I wanted to build within AI is specifically put around these roundtable discussions, giving us the ability to get deeper into the subject matter and really talk about this, right, from a practitioner perspective. So all of these roundtables are practitioner-led, practitioner-driven, which gives you that neutrality that that long for, because it's not just sponsored by a vendor who's trying to push an agenda or talk about a particular use case or an example about why you should be using their technology or what use case or technology solved. So here it's, we'll be coming together. You'll have a handful of people sitting at the round table, and they'll be able to discuss this in a free fashion, right? So you'll have the ability to kind of have your voice be heard. You could chime in. You'll be able to introduce yourself. It's more of a conversational, more of an intimate setting where, we could all exchange knowledge, talk about best practices, current trends, but also learn from one another, right? And so format of the entire conference and what makes it unique from that perspective is built solely around that piece, which is the roundtables. We'll have an exhibit hall. There'll be, the ability for people to go and visit with the vendors and say hello and look at new technologies or see demonstrations of technology. But here, again, the point that I'm wanting to get across is the focus is really on the discussions. And people who participate will speak not once, not twice, but 4 times. So you'll be able to do that on Tuesday, the 28th, and then on Wednesday, the 29th, before we let everyone go at 12:30 on Wednesday. So what I'm seeking to do over the next course of a handful of years is continue to build on these roundtables. And we'll just have more roundtables and more practitioners coming to talk about what AI means to them. And I think that's a great format for people to not only see an ROI, because you as a participant are spending time, money, energy away from, your ability to earn an income, right? You're going to be taking time off doing whatever podcasts or whatever you're doing to come all the way to Las Vegas to spend time there. And so you want to build on your network. You want to interact with other people who are like-minded, and that you can leverage those relationships post-event to identify ways to work together. And so that's really the whole beauty behind the format and the thinking that I put into it, so that it would benefit the people that are coming, so they could see a real ROI and get real impact into wherever they fall within this broader AI world, right? That's kind of where I wanted to put data first, and so that's the thought process behind it.
Yeah, I really like that format. It addresses the need to rely on serendipitous encounters a lot of the time, where it's like, okay, if you're basically trying to get to enough things at a conference to hopefully meet those couple people that make the conference worthwhile, or you're running back and forth to hopefully see the session or the panel that gets you the little bit of information. Instead, you're putting people together to have an intentional conversation with their peers. And one of the things, and I realize the irony is, we're creating a webcast, putting content out there, but there is so much content out there that people are really looking for how does that relate to me, and then how can I begin to meet other people and engage with them to dive deeper into the subject, right? Whether they've been there and done that, led it before, somebody coming up in the ranks, how can they help each other? I mean, maybe just speaking for me, because I can't be at home virtual all the time, got to meet with people. But I really feel that is going to become more of the future, is intentional human connection, because the rest of it, the content, is at a click away without having to run across a city to find.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. And I'm just excited. I mean, because I've hosted events in the past, and they were primarily in electronic discovery and information governance, and more recently, cybersecurity, privacy, and data protection. Now what I've done is I've brought all of what I would call, there's subcomponents now, there's tracks now that, appeal to legal professionals, that appeal to security professionals, privacy professionals. But I think that's also a difference in what we're doing, because when you see the other, events, they're very heavily focused on data engineers, machine learning, data scientists, which is fine. And I don't really see other conferences really attracting like chief information security officers, chief privacy officers, chief risk officers, right? CFOs. And what we're saying is, hey, AI is here, and we know that you all play a major role in AI's implementation into your business. So why don't you come, and talk about that? And it's been well received, that message. And so that's what Put Data First is about. It's about bringing all of these individuals who otherwise wouldn't ordinarily get together, because for the most part, you'd have a chief information security officer go to a security conference like RSA, right? But now, I'm saying, why don't you come here, have your voice be heard, interact with other security practitioners, because we will have a tremendous amount of people come from security and privacy. So that gives them the ability to kind of understand what are others doing in similar roles. Right. Outside of just even the event, we're going to be in Vegas. So you'll have the ability to kind of, let your hair down, if that's the right terminology. But, essentially we'll have dinner events in the evening, and, we'll be doing things together so that, people can really have an opportunity to network and meet with what I would call old friends, or make new ones, right? Which is important either way. Yeah.
Great. I love that. Before we go on too much further, I wanted to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, right? And talk about, those new CDOs coming on, who are realizing that, hey, they have a couple years to figure out what needs to be done. What are the ghosts that they have to uncover? So let's just talk a little bit about what have you seen as really beneficial approaches to that? What are the things that they need to be considering, that they should be asking, that they should be looking for, so that they could begin to build the foundations of a properly functioning data organization?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing and what a lot of the folks have been sharing with me is that they're putting these task committees together or these internal groups that are specifically tasked with artificial intelligence and and really working together and meeting more regularly to open up those communication channels so that they're not really sitting in these silos.
Hmm.
Right. And so I'm seeing a lot of successes around that. And also, you know, I think what I'm hearing as well is just kind of taking it in small steps, baby steps. Just like, if you're a customer service organization, right, and you want to start to leverage artificial intelligence and you want to see how you can save time, money, energy, right, and a reduced task force or what have you, right. What I'm seeing is they're identifying use cases that are small and a little bit more fine-tuned for their specific problem or whatever goal they're seeking to meet, and tackling that first, right. And so
Hmm.
and there's a lots of consulting companies like Accenture, Deloitte, and even others. There's a lot of even 1 to 2 person consulting companies, 6, 7, 8 person consulting companies that are doing a good job just kind of working their territory wherever they're at. They could be based out of Texas or New York or Chicago, who are just going out and working with these individuals, these companies, these enterprises, to find ways that they can leverage artificial intelligence and do that in an ethical, sound way, right. And that's why their job exists, is because they're helping hold the client's hand, per se, right. And so I'm noticing a lot of that as far as like data quality is concerned, and what have you. I see a lot of companies are starting to leverage a lot more technology tools,
Hmm.
and really working with data people to identify what sources of data they want to leverage for any LLM, right, or agent or what have you, right, whatever that specific project or that need may be. So I'm hearing and seeing a lot of that as well. But I think a lot right now are building a lot of use cases around specific technologies to bring in-house to identify where that may help them and what that potential ROI may look like. And I think a lot of companies are focusing on the ROI piece in particular. Like, if I bring this technology in-house, what is it going to replace, or am I going to save money, CapEx, OpEx? What does that look like? And I think a lot of that is being, driven in dialogue, conversation between the end client and the vendor that's providing either the consulting services or the technologies. Look at what OpenAI did. They opened up a consulting arm.
Hmm.
So, some have argued, well, that may be because they're looking for another revenue stream, or others are saying, they're looking to go deeper and wider into their existing client base, right, to leverage artificial intelligence. So again, you have these companies that are, putting on these workshops and doing all of that. And certainly I've participated in a handful myself, even here locally. But it's top of mind. It's interesting. I think what I'm seeing is the CEO, it's coming from the CEO saying, hey, I know I need this to be part of my business in order to be successful and competitive with everyone else that we're competing against. You have the CFO who's like, how am I, where are we going to budget to pay for this? And then you got like the chief data privacy, the chief privacy officer, who are concerned about data privacy issues, right? And what that impact is on the business, and specifically within artificial intelligence. I've also had a conversation with lots of chief security officers who are saying the business people want me to unleash AI. Some of our other stakeholders and others are kind of like saying, well, let's take it in strides.
Hmm.
What's the happy, I guess, what's the middle ground? Where do we find ways to turn it up, turn it down? How are we going to manage all of this? And so AI security is certainly becoming a big thing. I've even seen technology companies, I've been looking at technology demos, some of those that are going to be exhibiting, or even, giving, enterprises the ability to even, track and detect hallucinations, right? So this is becoming a lot more of an AI governance. I think that's
Hmm.
what I want to leave people with this. I think AI governance is really becoming a real big thing here, and becoming a top priority. I also have a lot of legal friends, a lot of lawyers that I worked with in my past life, and they're busy with policy and procedure, and how do we make sure that we have our ducks in a row for any potential legal issues that may arise from the misuse of artificial intelligence, or from employees leveraging these technology tools, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's definitely dramatically changing the landscape.
This is becoming more of a topic that I'm hearing, and we'll have to have another conversation around what does risk look like as we get into more AI adoption, because as we have these really complex agentic workflows that are making decisions on their own, this is a whole new risk profile that organizations now need to take into account, and insurance companies who are underwriting that risk are going to have to take into account. But that's a whole other conversation. Chris, I want to thank you very much for being on. For those who are still interested in the conference, when is it? We know it's in Vegas. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to get into all that. So the website address is www.putdatafirst.com. That's PUTDATAFIRST.com. It's all words. You can go there and take a look at the topics. The agenda is up. We have a short list of speakers, and we're continuing to add more speakers. And you can take a look at the types of profile people that are coming. And if it's of any interest to you, you can fill out the contact form, and either myself or one of our team members will reach out and schedule a meeting to help you get registered and settled in. That's really essentially where you could find us. And we're going to be around for many years to come. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm looking forward to building on this. And we would like people to be, more people to obviously help grow the community. So, if you have any thoughts or ideas about potential topics, I'm not saying that we know it all. We'll take topic submissions. If you want to moderate a session and you feel like there's something credible that you can add to the overall discussion, we'll hear you out. You could do that too. We don't have any politics here at the Put Data First conference. So I think all of those things are what make it, nice and welcoming for people to participate. And again, if you feel like that's something that you want to get involved in, and you want to network with like-minded practitioners, then I think it's a perfect opportunity for you, or anyone else who's seeing this video may want to join. The dates are October the 27th through the 29th. And that's a Monday through Wednesday. The speaking portion, the roundtables take place on Tuesday the 28th, and then on Wednesday the 29th. We'll end on Wednesday at about 12:30 p.m. Pacific. And we're going to be having the event at the Planet Hollywood. So that's the location. And just exciting time.
Great. Okay. It's exciting. I'm excited for anybody listening. I will be there as well, so it'll give us a chance to connect too. Looking forward to seeing you in person in Vegas in almost 2 months.
Yes.
Or it'll probably be a lot sooner by the time the video gets out. So thank you again for coming on. I really appreciated your insights.
Thank you. I appreciate the platform and you giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the conference. Thank you.
Great. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Bye.